everyone to another exciting member workshop produced exclusively for our members by our members. My name is Annie, and I am the Senior Manager, Member Engagement at Toronto Region Board of Trade. So today, I am pleased to introduce our experts at Bromwich+Smith, who will be speaking to us about a relevant and timely topic, talking money to your honey, financial conversations between partners. Now, I don't know about you, but given the time, I'm allowing someone in. So now I really don't know about you, but given the time we've spent working from home, and most of us cooked up with our partners, I'm pretty sure this is an even more important topic. A dedicated team of licensed insolvency trustees and debt relief specialists, Bromwich+Smith has led the industry in recognizing the humanity of their clients and adjusting their language with the ultimate goal of destigmatizing debt. The company's efforts have been recognized by the Toronto Star Readers' Choice Awards, both in 2019 and 2020, and the Better Business Bureau Torch Awards. So if anyone knows a thing or two about financial management, it's Bromwich+Smith. So in this session, we will delve into our money habits, money personalities, share stories from personal experience, and explore ways to make it easier to talk about money with your honey so you can thrive together. Without further ado, I will turn the platform over to our moderator and co-host, Taz Rajan, Community Engagement Partner at Bromwich+Smith. Welcome, Taz.
Thank you so much, Annie, for that beautiful, beautiful intro. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to be part of the Toronto Regional Board of Trade and to have this opportunity. I also want to welcome my co-host today, Laurie Campbell, who's the Director of Client Financial Wellness here at Bromwich+Smith and a recognized national expert on personal finances. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you.
And, we know that this is a topic that can kind of make us feel a little bit squeamish. Okay, so Laurie and I are going to get started. We're going to share a little bit about our own, personal stories of being in a relationship, with a significant other and sort of our money stories with our honeys in the past or even in the present. So we're going to get started with that. We're each going to share our story a little bit. And then we do have some poll questions, and I'm really hoping that will help get us started and start getting a little more engagement. I personally prefer conversation versus presentation. So, yes, we are experts in the industry, but all of you have lived experience. And I really hope that we can have a hearty, I want us to feel like we're at a coffee shop, having a nice latte or whatever is your favorite drink. And we're just, having a wonderful conversation, sharing our stories and just learning from one another. So I'll start real quick, Laurie, and you can, we'll banter a little bit.
Yes.
But for me, I am single now, happily divorced for many, many years. But prior to, being with that significant other, prior to being with my spouse, I had really learned to budget when I was about 16 years old with my first job. I had my Excel spreadsheet and I was really, really on every penny. I knew where every penny was going. And then, we had the courtship and the dating, and we never really talked about finances or money during that period. We talked about values and we talked about whether we wanted to start a family or not. We talked about, some dreams, where we wanted to live and how we wanted to travel, but we didn't actually talk about, debt or finances or how we were going to manage things. I don't know if this resonates with you at all, Laurie, maybe with your experience, maybe you talked about it. So then we get married and now, we decided to have a joint bank account. But I was still, he was really particular about money and budgeting, and I was really particular. We would kind of like butt heads on who was in charge and who's paying the bills and that sort of thing. And eventually, we kind of decided, listen, one person needs to take the lead here. And I decided that I would step back. And that was big for me. Okay. I was in my 20s. I was a little Miss Independent and, I came with a lot of attitude. So I thought it was a big deal. But Lori, not only did I step back a little bit, I literally stuck my head in the sand. That's the next thing I did.
Which so many people end up doing if they're like, okay, I'm hands off. I'm not even going to think about it.
I went completely hands on. I wouldn't check the bank account. I wasn't watching the bills. And I also, I turned into this like crazy spender. Like I just started to go, because now I wasn't watching. I wasn't looking at what was happening with the accounts. And so, and it felt like this parent-child relationship, because then he'd start like, hey, what was this? You know, this, we got this bill for this, or hey, you put this much on the credit card. I'm like, are you questioning me? Like it was
hiding things in the back of the closet. Oh yeah.
Yes, it became this terrible dynamic. And where the rubber really hit the road was when we went through our divorce. You know, so I was dealing with the divorce and still head in the sand. I was a mortgage broker at that time, and he took care of, you know, my quarterly tax stuff and everything to do with CRA. So now go through my divorce, and I just was like, taxes, CRA, la, 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 la.
Oh my.
And then got smacked with like an $80,000 tax bill that wasn't actually accurate. But a lot of people don't know that, like, if you're not filing your taxes, CRA can kind of just base it on, you know, past things.
And there's penalties that go along with it.
Oh
and,
my God.
You know, interest, it can get out of control for sure.
It was so scary. And boy, I'll tell you, then I was in a common law relationship after that. And we had, you know, one account that we put our money into, but there was no more of this joint account.
Right.
There was no more putting my head in the sand and not, you know, so
well,
I mean, we learn from our experiences, right?
It's a lesson well learned. You know, it's interesting because I'm also divorced, and maybe it's a world full of divorced people. I don't know. I'm also divorced, and give us a little love in the chat, guys, if you're also, you know, fellow divorcees. So, okay, we could use a little love. Yeah, exactly. But you know, the funny thing is that I kind of went into that blind too in my 20s, and the funny thing is that he's very smart about money. He really was. But he was also very controlling about money. His own. So he had his own bank account, and I had my own bank account, and we split the bills. He made a lot more than me at the time. And we were splitting the bills. And I look back on that, like, what kind of a relationship is that? Aren't you supposed to, you know, help each other? And I remember I always paid the bills, just like the utility bills and tax bills and all that kind of stuff. And so he was like, well, you know, this isn't right. I want to start paying the bills. So I said, okay, fine. You can pay the bills. Well, our utility almost got cut off. Back in the day, we had a landline that was like going to be disconnected. So he just was so disorganized paying all the bills. So I had to take it all back. So you have to know each other's strengths, first of all. He might be good at squirreling away money, but he never liked paying the bills. I mean, maybe he thought that he didn't have to. I'm not sure.
Yes.
In the end, though, what it came down to is the fact that we had very, very different money messages growing up. I mean, his money messages growing up, he was an immigrant to Canada, and his money messages growing up were, you know, you got to save every dime you can. You can't trust anybody. You've got to put money away for a rainy day because it could be poor at some time. And his parents did not speak English very well. So they were victims of fraud, quite frankly, and they were victims of being ripped off. So he got those messages. I got the messages that, you know what, you do save, but you have some pleasure in life and you can spend. So, you know, when you get into a relationship, you have to look at where you're both coming from and what your upbringing, you know, really how that resonated for you when it comes to money.
That leads into our first poll question so well, actually. I'm so glad you brought it up. So let's bring this up. And feel free, you can unmute yourself or, you know, open up your video if you would like. You certainly do not have to. Feel free to chat. Thank you, Linda, for your message. And okay, everybody's already answered. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. Poll questions are coming in. Oh, I'm excited. So while you're answering the poll, I'm just going to read. Linda has said, yes, happily divorced as well. Seasoned CPA, deep into numbers. Husband was similar about spending and putting his head in the sand. Oh, he was like me. Oh my God. And Linda says she went 150K in debt from the divorce and starting over with a new business. Thank you, Linda, so much for sharing that, because, you know, we're starting to normalize this. Like, we can start to feel like we're the only person that went through this. And I know when I was going through my divorce, just feeling like, oh my God, I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. Like, nobody else goes through this. And here you are sharing a very similar story to mine. So thank you.
It's so true. And I think that that's the thing, is that, you know, we've all experienced financial difficulty. Let's face it, you know, everyone goes through some type of financial difficulty. And I think we need to open up that conversation. I think it's something, it's kind of like the last taboo. And I always thought, you know, people would rather talk about their sex life than their financial life. And I just think that's so fascinating. So the more we can normalize this conversation and say, it's okay to talk about your debt. It's okay to talk about your investment. It's okay to say you don't know. I mean, I don't know how many times I've talked to a financial planner or my bank, and I'm thinking, I don't know what they're talking about. And yet I was too embarrassed to say something. You know,
the jargon and whatnot.
Yes,
and Linda, you've unmuted yourself and turned on your video. I'm guessing you want to join in on this conversation. So thank you.
This is my kind of conversations.
Oh, I love it. Welcome.
I certainly, I see it a lot. I'm relating to both your stories because I'm a money relationship coach now, have been for 5 years, and I see it with my clients all the time as well. And I think it has to do also with our generation. Our parents never talked about money. Ever. Like, I don't, and this is, it's a common theme with my clients in our generation. And I know even with my kids, I talked a little bit about money, but not a lot until after the divorce, and started talking to them a lot more about it, and now teach financial literacy. And I go in and do workshops in the schools. It's a big deal. And those kids remember it years later.
Right. Yes. Oh, thanks so much for sharing, Linda. And I definitely want to connect with you. And Liz, who's a trustee here with Bromwich+Smith, has written in, I'm still surprised when a couple comes in and one partner has no knowledge of the debt that their significant other has. And that's so common, you know. So we're going to dive into some of these conversations, but let's have a look at our first one. Our first question was, you know, can you guys see the poll?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Did your family talk about money when you were growing up? 53% of, you know, the people that are here today are saying, no, our family didn't talk about money. And so then, guys, no wonder, then we go into a relationship of our own and, you know, start our own families, and we wonder why things are not so great money-wise, right? I know for me, in our family, we only talked about money growing up when my mom overspent or they fought, right? It was very, very one-sided. Dad was always the one that said things like, money doesn't grow on trees. Or he'd say, like, Mom and I would go shopping and we'd be like, oh my God, this was such a good deal. And he'd say things like, well, even if it's $1, if it's not in your budget, it's too much.
Exactly.
Which I hated that when I was younger. And now I say it to other people. I'm like, oh my God, I've turned into my father.
You know, and it's interesting, Taz. I came from a family where my mom was always trying to look at some way to make money. And I remember once, it's like, this is not a money lesson, trust me. Once she was told by someone from Toronto, because I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, that she was told that copper was going to go like through the roof. So she went to all the banks in Sault Ste. Marie and bought all the copper. Okay, so my dad had to drag this copper down to the basement from the car, and it sat there for over a year. And guess what? It didn't go up in value. So we had to drag it all the way back up so my mom could take it back to the banks. But that's the kind of logic that my mother had when we were growing up on how to get a good deal. And, she thought she was on the insider trading, platform there.
Right. Those insider scoops and tips. Well, and my mom would always say things like, I'd rather be happy than rich, or I want to be a good person and not have money, not necessarily have money, but I want to be a good person. So I got these really mixed messages. And then you don't want to talk about money if the idea is you're not a good person if you talk about money, right?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned that about the messages you get. My grandmother, bless her heart, she used to always say, the best man is a rich man with 1 foot in the grave.
Right? Oh my gosh. And Linda's very old and very question here. I'd love if everybody anyone that answered yes, you did talk about money growing up. Linda's asked, what was your ethnic background or age of the people that are saying yes? you did talk about money when you were kids, like your family talked about money? Yeah, that's a great question, Linda. It'd be interesting to see if it has anything to do with maybe age, because I know this idea of financial literacy has been bounced around a little bit more, let's say in the last decade or so. There are some things going on in schools. There are some people, tapping into some of these kinds of webinars. So it would be interesting to see. I'm going to put up our next poll question though, because I think we can dive right into the next one. It's going to go very well with what we're already talking about. So here we go. Do you think that your parents were good with money? And, I didn't want to keep these as boring yes and no. I've kind of changed the answers a little bit here. So we could talk about, do you think your parents were actually good with money? And I'm going to share a little bit of mine. Lori, you can share yours, and then I'd be happy to hear some other stories. So I feel like my parents did not that bad, being immigrants. I know somebody else talked about that. They were immigrants. They came here with like literally $20 in their pocket. None of their things had transferred over. They were business owners there and they had to start from scratch. My dad had 3 daughters and we all had very large East Indian weddings that he paid for out of his pocket. He bailed me out several times. So I feel like they did the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. Looking back now as an adult, I can't imagine the stress and pressure they must have been under. I feel like they were really stretched and they've been overworked. My dad worked 7 days a week for the majority of our lives. He's 72 now and he still works, maybe not quite the long hours or as many days, but and he's not comfortable with me asking those questions now, like, hey, Dad, like, is there any debt, or how are we doing? Have you got a nest egg, or, but I think they did the best that they could. How about you, Lori?
Yeah, well, and I would have to echo that as well. My dad was an accountant, so, money came and finances came naturally from him. And my parents they grew up poor. Like they were both, from farmers and really rural area types that didn't have anything given to them. So they really, we had allowances, we had chores. They made us get a job. I made us all 4 of us get jobs at very young ages. So babysitting, dog walking, newspaper routes, whatever. And right. I think that work ethic was really instilled in us. And I think the idea of giving allowance was a good idea because it helped us understand that there was limited resources with your money and you had to make a stretch. And my parents never had any debt when it came to credit cards. And I think that was key. Back in those days, you might have one credit card and that was all that was available. And that's the problems today is that there's so many opportunities to get in debt. And as a couple, if you're not talking about it, you really have to have pen to paper, quiet, comforting conversations and not in the heat of the moment to discuss finances because it's easy to hide debt and money from a spouse if it's a volatile situation.
And Lori, not only is it a lot of opportunities to get debt, it's so easy because the banks are actually pushing it.
Yes, exactly. They're telling you it's good to get in debt.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All of the stories, right? If you look at commercials, like, do you guys remember it was a MasterCard commercial and it was like, this was this much, this was this much, and then this was priceless. Priceless. Do you remember that? And those experiences are priceless, but they're encouraging you to put that priceless experience onto your MasterCard. I worked at the bank. I was a mortgage broker, and you'd be talking to a client and you would get this pop-up that said they're pre-approved for X, Y, and Z. So you would bring it up to them, and the client is sitting there going, well, this is my banker. I trust my banker. Obviously, they wouldn't offer me something that wasn't in my best interest, right? Or even as a mortgage broker, I remember the ads like refinance your mortgage to go on a trip. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
And payday loan commercials. I always had that. Oh, I wanted to go on a last minute vacation. I didn't have money till payday. Are you kidding me? Gazillion percent.
We always get email from the bank saying, you have, now we give you this much money, like you can use a line of credit.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
I know for myself, the financial industries that I dealt with, or the financial institutions I dealt with, absolutely facilitated me going into 150,000 of debt.
For
Absolutely.
sure. For sure.
Had they actually looked and thought about it, they, or even myself, if I had been in a different state of mind at that time, I mean, you both know going through divorce, it plays around with your head quite a bit. I would not have done that. I would have made.
We don't know what we don't know though, Linda. Like if you think back,
even as
we
an
don't
accountant, right?
Right.
And you're both financial backgrounds as well. So we put a lot of shame on ourselves as well. And guilt
yes.
for not knowing.
Well, and I think that speaks to the fact that, you know, again, this whole taboo around money and around debt and around talking about it. And you know, Linda, when you were going through that, you probably didn't have anyone to talk to except your bank, and they don't have your best interest in mind when it comes to your accumulation of debt. So this is why, you know, these conversations are so important for us as individuals and as we go into relationships. Because, you know, let's face it, it's not first date material to talk about your debt. But when do you start talking about it, right? Well, you know, it's not romantic. Oh yeah, like I have all this debt, but when, you know, I think that we need to figure out, when do you talk about it? When does that conversation begin? And because in my experience in the past, people gotten married without even having any clue what type of debt the other person was bringing into the relationship. So,
absolutely, all the time.
It's so important to
know. I like Anka's comments.
I had no clue. I invited him to live with me without knowing, because I still didn't want to have those conversations.
Yeah, and you know, you almost feel like you're, you know, people can twist things. So you say, well, you know, I'd like to know about your financial situation. And they say, well, are you a gold digger, or you know what I mean? So no, I'm an independent person that really wants to know what financial obligations you have.
A friend of mine has a financial screening tool for her prospects in terms of, if I'm dating this person, if it goes beyond the third date, she has this whole, are you qualified financially to date me?
Wow. That is awesome. Goodness. I love it.
That's amazing.
On one side, but on the other side is like, are you kidding me?
That's incredible. That's going a long way.
Honestly, we spend more time talking about, like you said, like talking about sex and things like that with our partner, which I'm not saying that's not important. That's very important, but we don't.
Or this rash that won't go away. Or something.
Oh gosh, hopefully not, right? Or like, you know,
well, I'm just saying, it's the last taboo.
The frivolous things, and we don't talk about, and maybe you don't need a screening, but I think we do need some tools, some language. And the biggest thing is we got to get over the taboo, the shame and the stigma around it. And it being this awkward thing, like, what is wrong with you? We're still dating, or like, we just got engaged. Why are we even having this conversation? It needs to start becoming like, this is what everybody does. You know, there was a time, do you guys remember like this idea of making a list of your ideal partner? Like that was so bizarre at one point, right? It was so bizarre. And now it's very commonplace. Everybody kind of does this. This is what I'm looking for in a partner. It would be so lovely if it would just be commonplace, that as we're getting further into that relationship and maybe moving in together or maybe becoming engaged or whatever that might look like, that it's commonplace that we kind of talk about debts and our money personalities. I know there's these really cool flashcards, and it's kind of like a game that you play that helps you kind of figure out your money personality, your money habits, and like it kind of like you do the whole thing, and it kind of like, it's almost like a tarot card reading, really. Yeah. And then it kind of spits out to you, well, this is kind of your overall personality. Here are some things you could focus on. So like, you know, that's cool because that makes it fun. It could be like a fun date thing. You know I used to, when I was single and I was dating online, I would ask if my partner, you know, the person I was dating had ever read the 5 love languages. And that was kind of my way of like, well, why don't you read that? Or why don't you do this quiz? And we could just see if we're compatible on that thing. So there are ways to make talking about money fun and interesting. And I think, like, how close can that bring you as a couple to be able to tear down those walls and that shame and that stigma and be transparent and vulnerable with one another, right? And
I'm going to give you a cautionary tale, and I'll be brief on this, but this is a true story. A woman I know, she met this lovely man. She thought he was 18 years younger than her, but there was love, and she was determined she was going to marry this man. So she put all the money into the wedding, and he was going to pay for the hotel. They like the bridal suite, the whole bit. So come the wedding night, they have their wedding, they're going back to the hotel, and he is opening up the envelopes, that you get as gifts, taking out the cash to pay for the hotel room. So like they never had a discussion about money. He was completely destitute. He couldn't hold down a job. He used any little bit of money she had. She had to sleep in the end. She had to sleep with her purse underneath her pillow. And so, the moral of the story is that, yeah, it's not sexy to talk about money, but that's not sexy either.
No.
To get into that situation and really be like, really, truly, she was taken advantage of completely. And it was simply because she was so over the moon about this man that she thought was just the cat's meow.
That kind of reminds me of that TV series, but it's based on true story, Dear John. Don't know if you guys heard about that story.
Yes, that's the one. I didn't watch it. I watched You, I think it was, but I've heard of Dear John. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it, Annie.
So that guy is actually a scammer. So he was like, I think he has like some aggression issue, and he got arrested and got released from the prison, and he went to a different state in US and met this really wealthy, established woman. She owns a company, like a designing company. And then he was so charming. He made her fall in love with him. And then they got married fairly quickly, probably like 3 months into the relationship. And she has no clue. He was a drug addict, and he was also like had criminal records, all the bad stuff. And then finally, he took advantage of everything. He has access to her bank account. He doesn't even have a job, but he was lying to her saying he's a doctor. So anyways, long story short, he made her kids go against her. So like her kids can see through this guy is not a good guy. So the mom, the girlfriend actually went against all her children. And then in the end, he was trying to murder one of her daughter.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was insane, but it was based on true story.
Oh, and this is called Dear John?
Yeah.
Not like
to watch.
Not like the movie Dear John.
No, not that Dear John. This one is not so dear.
And this is on Netflix?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, a cautionary tale. I mean, I think this happens far more than we believe. I mean, a lot of online situations where people get ripped off and, they're lonely and desperate. It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
And we think that, I think a lot of we're like, that would never happen to me, or, like I'm pretty savvy or whatnot. But, I personally know of stories. I know one lady in Calgary that was a VP of a company, and she was totally, completely swindled because it's like anything else. They groom you over time. They build that trust, and they thrive on our shame and stigma and taboo around talking about this. And come on, you'll get that as women. We really get that, that gut feeling, but we don't want to bring it up. We don't want to jeopardize the relationship or their shame and stigma around talking about it. And I'm so glad that we're talking about it here. Enka, did you want to share something? I see that you've come on camera. You're on mute, my dear.
Hi everyone. Yes, I think there is a stage in relationship when we go through extreme trust, and then that trust washes off over time if something happens. And those are the moments on the trust when we are tempted to be a little bit more comfortable talking about financing and investments, and probably this way, this financial aspects of ourselves. So. But it's not always, it doesn't have to be always with a bad, non-happy ending. Sometimes it comes across that people who are really very good with investments, which I met, they actually are very good listeners. So they do listen and they absorb information, and they can place a judgment on you saying, yes, she's she's the type, mostly she's the type of spender, or she's the type of thinking before spending or something. So I met this type of persons, and I have to say that there were the best discussions that I had, because you know, when you listen and you see that, evaluate the other person that it's doing, you know, a story about different aspects, financial aspects, then you can have a little bit of the insights of that person, right? So that determines if you want to be with that person or just want to run away.
Yeah.
I love it. And you're so right. Like, it doesn't always have to end in this brutal way, but I think if we can start having the conversation, and it's just a little, it's exactly like the love languages, just because your languages aren't the same doesn't mean you can't work through that. So having the conversation just means, okay, we got some work to do here. Are we willing to work on that together? And I think that's really the key.
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about that, and I mentioned that earlier, is that you, like, you know, do it don't do it at a time where things are volatile, or, you know, there's been a purchase or it's a heated discussion. Really take the time to map it out. It might be something that you do once a month, where you look at your financial situation, you make sure you're on track. It may be that you each have $100 spending limit, and if anything is over $100, you have to discuss it with the other person to make sure it makes sense for you as a couple. So, you know, these are really important tools to start really using early on. And it can happen even over, you know, a third or fourth date dinner. Who pays for that? And, you know, you start to balance that discussion out. Well, maybe it's my turn, you know, don't want you to have all that burden, etc.
And I'd like to say it's never too late to start having this conversation. Maybe you're way past dating. Maybe you're celebrating your 25th wedding anniversary and you've never had the money conversation, right? I think it's never too late to say, hey, let's come to the table. Let's both lean in here. Let's, like, we haven't done this in the past, but can we start, you know, looking at this? Can we start talking about this? So, all right. Have you ever hidden a purchase from your partner? And I think, you know, not everybody responded to this one because, you know, maybe your partner's on here, you're thinking they may or whatnot, but heck yeah, we have 57% said, heck yeah, I've hidden a purchase from my partner. I'd love if anyone's willing to share a little bit around that. You know, I personally suspect that the only reason we would hide something from someone is because of fear, shame, guilt. Like, I think if there was this really open, or if it was a surprise for them, right? But if we're in this open space and we're in a good space for ourselves with our own money and in our relationship, I think generally we're probably not hiding a lot. But if anyone, I don't know, Lori, do you want to pipe in on this one?
I mean, I have to admit, when in my first marriage, like with my ex, I hid purchases because he was always like, spend. I'd buy a raincoat and I didn't have a raincoat. He was always, you know, trying to, you know, make me feel guilty about spending money. And
right.
I just didn't want the interrogation. Like, he would have an old pair of jeans, and like, he's twice my size. And you say, I don't want these anymore. Do you want them? So
like, I'm going to swim in them.
Exactly. So I learned very early on in the relationship, I didn't want the difficulty. I didn't want the harassment. So I just, you know, no, I've had it forever. What new thing? What are you talking about?
Yes, I know. I did that because, you know, like I said, I buried my head in the sand, and I didn't like when he would question me because I was not, you know, involved. So it was like, I think I was like retaliating at myself. Like, I was kind of mad at myself that I'd given up the reins completely. And then he would like question things. And so then I would retaliate by buying things and hiding them. And it was totally self-defeating. It was completely self-defeating, but I didn't know better. And we weren't in a place where we were openly talking about money. And honestly, looking back, like, my ex-husband would have so been willing to have these conversations and to say, okay, well, why don't you do this part? Or like, well, get involved. Like, let's have budget meetings or something like that. But I didn't have the self-image. I didn't have the wisdom maybe that I do now. Liz, you look like you want to pipe in here, please.
Sorry, what Lori was saying about the interrogation, not that my husband interrogates me, but we each have, I'm going to call it an allowance every month. Like, it's our free spending money.
Love that.
Sometimes some of the girly stuff that I want to buy, I feel like he's going to judge me. Like, why did you spend your money on a $50 bottle of perfume or that pair of shoes. Do you already have a red pair of shoes? Do you really need another red pair of shoes? And I just don't want to deal with it. Like,
they don't get it.
yeah, he would never actually judge me for it. But sometimes I feel a little guilty because I know that even though it's my fun money, I might not be making the best decision I could be making
And
by
that's
buying another pair of
okay.
red shoes.
Right? Yeah, I know. That's okay. I know. I remember my ex saying, how many black pairs of shoes do you need?
Right?
I said, well,
yeah.
Lots.
But I love that you each have your own fun money, whether you call it an allowance or you call it the fun money or whatever that is. I feel like if anyone's taking notes, I think that's a great takeaway that, you know, if you are wanting to get into these conversations with your partner, I like that one. I'm tucking that one away in my tool belt for if I'm ever in a relationship again. I think that is so great. Or even the one that Lori said that, you know, up to this dollar amount, we just do our own thing. But once we hit this dollar amount, then we've got to have a conversation. And I feel like for me, sometimes I can be such an impulse buyer. So I think if I had that dollar amount to have a conversation, I think sometimes I would, you know, the crazy impulse would go away and I'd be like, wait a second, actually, this is not logical, or this is not moving us towards our goals or whatever.
Yeah, and I love Linda's statement that she just put in the chat. Fun money is supposed to be just that. Fun.
Exactly.
No
Guilt-free
guilt spending. And I think that's a really key, is that it has to be guilt-free spending. It's this is your little opportunity. Can you imagine if your fun money is spent on things you don't want, just so that someone else doesn't think that you're being silly with it, right? And so it should be your own fun and to do what you want with it. Go buy that perfume, Liz. Just go do it.
But you know what? I got to tell you, part of it is my own guilt. Like, I guilt myself. And I think it's because I've been in the insolvency community for so long.
Right.
I see the mistakes on a daily basis. Maybe not mistakes. They were good decisions at the time, but things got compounded. But I see the predicaments that people can get themselves into. And I'm like, oh, Liz, you should know better. You should know better, because you see your clients doing this. So sometimes I also have the work guilt.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because I used to feel that way too for many years, because and I used to always say, you know, death can happen to anybody.
Absolutely.
Right? And you
death
see
does not discriminate.
The everyday average person that you wouldn't have any idea that they have this huge debt or financial difficulties. And I think that you just feel like it could happen to me. It happened to me personally. So you become uber. I used to always say when I was at Credit Canada that the people that worked there were the cheapest people I knew, because they lived in
the
fear
most frugal.
that any debt problems can happen to them, because it can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, Linda was doing this, and me too. Like Linda and I we both come from that financial services background. And I, you know, like I said, I worked at Scotiabank for 5.5 years. I was a mortgage broker for 10 years. After divorce, after a car accident and this huge CRA bill, I did end up filing into bankruptcy. And I cannot tell you the shame, the guilt, the sense of responsibility, because it's like, you're in the finance industry, you've been in the industry this long, you should know better. And I just want to say, just because you're in the finance industry, first of all, the financial industry is a massive, okay? There are different parts of it. So just because you're a mortgage broker or, you know, a financial planner, or, you know, it doesn't mean that you know all the things about all the different pieces of finances. And also, we are all human. We are going through a human experience, and there are a lot of unforeseen things. Yes, Liz, I agree. There are things that you can foresee and kind of say, hey, like, these are just good money habits, or these are just some things that I know I can avoid. And then there are just the things that we cannot avoid, that are not in our control. Divorce is one, you know, there's 4 big reasons generally that people will come to see us at Bromwich+Smith, like these 4 external triggers that are out of your control: divorce or death of a spouse, critical illness or disability, or job loss. These are, you know, so I'm sorry, I put divorce and death together, but those are, pandemic is another huge one, guys. And these are like outside our control. And perhaps, you know, there's this argument, well, if you'd had insurance, or if you'd had enough of an emergency fund. Well, I don't know about you. How many people do you know that have a 2-year emergency fund? I mean, you're doing really well if you've got 3 months, if you've got 6 months, or if you've got a year of emergency fund, and put 2 of those things together. So you lose your job, and then 6 months or a year later, you're also going through a nasty divorce. That could cripple anybody. So I think there's room for all of us. like Lori said, that debt can happen to anyone. It does not discriminate. And we got to have some grace with ourselves as well, and know that there is a fresh start. Like insolvency is not the end of the world either. So, Liz was saying, working in the insolvency industry, and I agree, it's really opened my eyes. It's changed how I look at money and my finances, but also in the way that I realize that insolvency is not the end of the world. I know that I have started fresh. I have a mortgage with an excellent rate. I have 2 credit cards, and I literally, honestly, I kid you not, I have the best credit score I've ever had in my life today, post bankruptcy. Because, oh man, let me tell you, I am wiser. I am making very, very, very informed decisions with my money now. So we just had this question, are you stashing any savings or investments, or money in a jar? And it's interesting. Most of us are saying, I wish I did. So, hey, you can start today, put some money aside. And I don't know if you necessarily need to hide it from your partner, but it's never too late,
do
right?
it together. That might be a good lesson there, to do it together. And, I think it comes along as well, Taz. We talk about, putting money away and things like that. As a couple, I think that really important to look at financial goals together. So when you're having that kitchen table talk once a month, what are your financial goals? Like short, medium, and long. Short term, let's take a trip, and so how, what do we have to say for that? Medium, okay, do we want to buy a house or a car in the future, or, pay off our mortgage within a certain amount of time? And long, where do we want to retire? How do we want to retire? When do we want to retire? So these types of conversations are so important to have with your significant other, even before you move in together or get married or whatever that may be. What are their goals? It might be a nice icebreaker. What are your financial goals? And it might be a good icebreaker to find out where they're at and where they want to be.
Well, and folk, that's talking about the why. Simon Sinek is famous, right, for his begin with the why, right? And that, I know for me, that's a lot of times what will steer me from that extra pair of red shoes is I'm kind of like, hey, what are my goals? What's my 1-year goal? What's my 6-month goal? What am I working towards right now? Is this moving me closer to that goal, or is it taking me away? So I love that as a couple, if you're talking about it, then rather than it being, hey, why'd you buy that red pair of shoes again? It's like, hey, like we kind of talked about, this was our goal this year, totally up to you. Do you feel like that's moving us closer or away from it? And if you're cool, if you're like, I need those red shoes to go dancing when we go to Spain, awesome. It's moving us closer to that goal, right? But I think that can be a great way to frame things, and what a positive way to have money conversations with your partner when you're talking about the future and your dream building and you're working towards this, common vision, right? And again, it gives you something to filter those purchase decisions through as well. So last question, have you ever made a purchase that you regret? Buyer's remorse. And we've got 67% stay. Oh, let me tell you a story about a purchase I regret. So if anybody wants to actually share their story, we're totally open. We've got about 10 minutes left for our time here together. Liz.
Oh, any piece of exercise equipment. It always becomes a clothes hanger.
You mean
or
clothes hanger? Yes.
Right. Or it gathers dust and something I have to clean later on. Any piece of fitness equipment. I have best intentions, and then I'm selling it on Facebook Marketplace 2 years later.
So you're not buying the latest Peloton, right?
I'm stopping myself. I'm establishing good willpower and habits and not getting the Peloton that I really desperately want.
Linda, did you have a story you wanted to share?
No, I was just asking, but did you actually use the equipment initially?
You know what? I'm a runner. We were talking about running at the beginning. So I always think I'm going to cross train, and I always just end up going back to running. So no, I never.
Which requires no equipment at all. I love it.
Just your shoes, $100 investment in your feet, and you're good. Off you
Maybe
go.
a cute tank top. Maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So go running.
And until you live in Ontario and it's minus 40 in the dead of winter, and just a little too chilly.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest purchases I regret was many, like decades and decades ago. My father was getting rid of his Chevy Chevette. And I thought, oh, I want to buy that. And he made me pay full price, whatever that was. I can't even remember now. And so
Love it.
I take this, first of all, I drive from Ottawa to Toronto with Chevette, and I hear like my dad's driving behind me because I'm moving to Toronto, and I hear things pinging, pinging, pinging. Finally, I stop, and all the fan belt, like the fan things, had all of them had gone off one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. Almost blew the whole engine, so that was a fortune to fix. Get to Toronto, parked it because I didn't realize in Toronto nobody, like if you're on the subway route, you don't drive. So it parked forever. I could not put it in reverse. So I had a boyfriend at the time. He had to push me out of the parking space because I had to put it neutral to push me out. So because my reverse didn't work. And then the last straw was my sister came into town. She's like, I really need a car. So, well, you can take my car. You can just pay me $100 a month for 5 months. Yeah, you can take $500. So within like a month of her getting it, I think she paid me $50. When her friend drove it and smashed it, got in a car accident, and rode it off. I never saw it. No, I consider that was a big bad purchase.
I can't think of any at the moment. There have been many. My biggest regret are the ones where you buy it somewhere where you cannot ever return it. Those are the ones that crush me. And, I worked in retail for many, 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 many years. I can remember every year having a 90% off sale. So I never pay full price for anything. And that 20% off sale is like a joke to me. I'm like, what? That's not even a sale. But what I often used to do was I would nickel and dime myself into debt. Oh my God, I found this great thing at a thrift store and it's, less than a quarter of the original price. And like, I didn't need it. It wasn't in my budget. So this was like what my dad used to say. Remember, he would say, even if it's $1, if it's not in your budget, it's not a good deal. And that's what I would do. Oh, this is on 80% off. This is on 70% off. This is, at a thrift store and this is, an antique or whatever. But like, so now it's I still love going thrifting, but I go with a focus. It's like, I am looking for this, or I am just looking for treasures and here's my budget, right? But definitely have a lot of regret of buying cheap things or great deals that either just sat around and collected dust or put me in a position where now I had to go into debt to pay bills because that wasn't part of the budget. So those are the ones that I regret the most.
And I think I love that where you just nickel and dime yourself, because I see myself doing that sometimes. And you go to the store with one thing in mind, you come out with something completely different.
Hello,
and
Costco.
You didn't get the thing that you wanted, right? And so, I mean, I do that grocery shopping far too much, but I think it's so easy, and to go shopping without a purpose is dangerous, right?
Yes.
If you're going shopping, you need socks. Okay, then you're going to get socks. But to go shopping without a purpose, you're going to end up with a lot of stuff that you probably don't even, need or want. And there's nothing worse than buyer's remorse. It usually happens about 2 days later, and you start thinking, what drugs was I on when I bought this?
What possessed me? Yeah, shopping is not a leisure activity. And I know I've noticed over COVID, because in Calgary, our malls have mostly stayed open. And that was my sister would be like, hey, want to go to the mall? And I'm like, oh, what for? And she'd be like, just to hang out, like, just to, it's like to get out of the house. And then I brought things home that I did, so I like that. I say that to myself, shopping is not a leisure activity. Like, it's not. You better go with a purpose or with a budget, or leave my wallet at home. And I agree, Liz, like, it is all set up. You think about Costco, because it's usually Costco that people are like, oh my God, I went in to get lettuce, $400 later. Couponing is another one, or how like Superstore, Loblaws will kind of have one is this much, but in multiples of 4, it's this much. So now you're like, oh, well, I got to get 4. Actually, one of our blogs talks about this, that there are all these things that seem like they're there to save us money, but they do put us into that FOMO, that fear of missing out situation. Like Linda says, like, it's such a great deal, I have to get it. Is it? Do you have to? Right? So I love that. Like, go with a purpose. There's that whole, just shop the perimeter, or just go to the one aisle that you need to go. Have a buddy. I think that really helps. And maybe it's not your partner. Maybe it's your BFF. And you're like, listen, I got a problem. For me, it's Dollarama, guys. I never leave Dollarama without spending at least $40, guys. Dollarama. So that's my, I'll like, I have a buddy that comes with me and I'm like, okay, we're going to Dollarama for this. I tend to go crazy at Dollarama. So I give you full permission to ask me questions when I'm putting not these things in the cart. I need you just to ask me, and like, I need a pause. I need a moment to pause and like figure out, do I actually, and so, sometimes I do need $40, $50 worth of stuff at Dollarama, but you know, I feel like that maybe not be the great thing to do with your partner, but then have a BFF, have a financial coach that's like willing to accompany you, you know, going shopping. I think a really great tip for me is like, I'm more motivated by reward than punishment. So like, you know, if I'm kind of like, oh, instead of $40, I only spent 15 at Dollarama, I can put the rest of that into my travel fund, or I can, you know, oh, now I can do this other activity that I can eat that cake or whatever it is. But, you know, having a reward for when we're being good to ourselves and good with our money, right?
Yeah,
so
I think
Linda,
that's really important.
sorry, I'll let Linda have the last. I don't want to read your whole thing. If you want to have a last quick little say here, and then maybe Annie can wrap us up.
Sure, it's just saying that I find the generation that went through the Great Depression, or the children of that generation, I'd say my parents are the children of that generation.
Yeah.
They tend to stock up, buy things in bulk on sale because they're afraid that the thing won't be available later, even if they don't need it. So I go to my parents and there's a ton of, they don't have a lot of money. They're poor farmers. They're still poor farmers.
Right.
A ton of stuff that they don't need, that's past the expiry date because they bought it on sale because it was a good deal and they might not have it later. And it's like, you just wasted all this money. They just, and they don't have a lot to begin with. They have nothing extra. It's like, you just wasted this. And I found,
which we saw during the pandemic again, right?
We saw it during the pandemic.
Oh yes, in droves.
So the fear that the things aren't going to be available when you do need them, and then you're just spending like crazy. And it turns out, hey, you don't need 50 million rolls of toilet paper.
Right? Who
Yeah.
knew? Oh, well, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to the Toronto Regional Board of Trade for, you know, allowing us a platform to start normalizing this conversation. Money and debt and finances generally are not a topic we love talking about. And then you add the honey piece to it. You know, just, and I just want to thank everybody that did speak up and everyone that did put things in the chat. Again, I recognize that this can be, it can feel really icky to talk about this. So, you know, Lori and I gab all the time. So having some of the rest of you pipe in made it just a better experience. I don't know, for me at least. And Lori, I love you and I could gab with you forever, but you know, having some more voices for me was just
yes. And
a fuller
some more
experience.
voices and more ideas and suggestions. I mean, this is a platform where everyone has great experience and great ideas. So thanks so much.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Taz, and thank you, Lori, for hosting this great round of workshop. And thank you for all our members to continue supporting Toronto Region Board of Trade. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.